The air was cool outside the small pizza shop at the corner of Westview Street. A gentle breeze carried the smell of cheese and baked bread through the open door. Inside, a few customers waited for their orders, chatting softly. At one of the tables, a young girl stood quietly in front of the counter, counting coins in her hand. Her clothes were old, a little faded at the edges but clean. Her name was Mira. She looked about 17, and her eyes had a quiet tiredness in them that didn't belong to someone so young. In her hand were a few coins, not enough for the pizza she had asked for. The man behind the counter gave her a kind smile, but shook his head. "I'm sorry, it's just not enough." Mira nodded politely, trying not to look embarrassed. "Okay, I'll come back later," she said, voice soft. She turned to leave when a deep, calm voice stopped her. "How much are you short?" The voice asked. Mira turned around and saw an older man sitting near the window, dressed in a simple brown coat. His face had wrinkles, but his eyes were bright and full of life. That was Thomas. Most people in the city didn't know who he really was. A millionaire inventor, once famous across the world, now living quietly in retirement. She hesitated. "Only 50 cents, she said, trying not to sound ashamed. Thomas smiled and stood up slowly. His legs were a bit stiff, but he walked over with steady steps. He pulled out a small silver coin from his coat pocket and handed it to the man at the counter. "Add a drink too," Thomas said. "On me," Myra looked surprised. "Thank you. But I didn't ask for help." "I know," Thomas said, smiling gently. "But I offered. Sometimes it's nice to be kind." Mira held the pizza box in her hands, speechless for a moment. Then she looked up at him and said something he didn't expect. "You remind me of someone. Someone I read about in school," she said. "He gave everything to help people, even when no one remembered his name. I think the world needs more people like that." Thomas blinked, caught off guard. He wasn't expecting such words from a girl her age. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mira." He smiled again. "Well, Mira, it was nice to meet you." Mira took a step toward the door, then paused. She turned back and said, "If I ever get rich, I'll do what you just did for me. I'll help someone without asking why." Then she walked out into the street, her pizza box warm in her arms. Thomas stood there, looking at the door long after she was gone. He sat back down by the window, watching the busy street. Something about Myra's words stayed with him. It had been years since anyone said something that made him feel remembered. Not for his inventions or money, but for simply being kind. He looked down at the small coin pouch he always carried. It had more than just money. Inside were small items he kept from long ago, an old photograph, a piece of metal from his first invention, and a folded letter from his late wife. But now he felt something new, a spark. He didn't know then. But that simple act, that short conversation, would be the beginning of something much bigger. Something that would shake the city, and maybe even the world. And it had started with just one slice of pizza. Asterisk. The next morning, Thomas sat in his small study room, sipping his usual cup of tea. Sunlight peeked through the window, casting soft golden lines across his bookshelves. It had been a long time since something stirred his thoughts the way Myra's words had done. He opened the small wooden box on his desk, the one he hadn't touched in years. Inside were notes from his past projects, hand-drawn blueprints, and sketches of machines that once made him famous. Most of the world had moved on from his inventions. New minds had taken the lead. But Thomas had never stopped creating. He just didn't show his work to anyone anymore. He picked up an old photo from the box. In it, he stood next to a machine he had once called the Sky Drifter, designed to carry aid supplies to far-off places. He had built it after a great flood many years ago. The machine had saved lives, but people had soon forgotten who made it. Mira's words echoed in his mind. "If I ever get rich, I'll do what you just did for me." It was just a small moment, yet it meant something. The way she looked at him, not for his money, but for his kindness, it reminded him why he had started inventing in the first place. Suddenly, he stood up. It was time to create again. Meanwhile, Mira sat on the edge of a narrow bed in a small room above a grocery shop. The pizza from last night was gone, and she now held a notebook in her lap, flipping through pages of her ideas. She didn't have much, no parents, no savings, no connections, but she had her mind. Her dream was simple: to build something one day, something helpful, something people would remember. She had no tools, no lab, and no team, just pencils, scraps of paper, and ideas. But she believed ideas were enough to begin. She turned to a page she had drawn the week before. A small wearable device that could warm hands during the winter for people who slept on the streets. She had seen old men shivering at night, wrapping themselves in newspapers. What if something small could help them? Mira sighed. If only I had the tools, she whispered. At that moment, her phone buzzed. A message from the pizza shop. It read, "The old man you met yesterday left something for you. Come by when you can." Later that afternoon, Mira returned to the shop. The same man at the counter handed her a small paper envelope with her name written neatly on the front. Inside was a folded note and something else, a key. The note said, "Dear Mira, I don't know your story, but I see fire in your eyes. The kind that builds, not breaks. If you're serious about doing something big, meet me at the corner of 6th and Maple tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring your ideas. T." She looked at the key in her hand, puzzled. But a small smile slowly formed on her face. The next morning, Mira walked carefully toward the address. The streets were quiet, and the old warehouse on the corner looked abandoned from the outside. But the door opened with a creak when she used the key. What she saw inside left her speechless. The space was wide, clean, and filled with machines, old but still working. Tools of all kinds lined the walls. There were tables, shelves with metal, parts, and even a 3D printer in the corner. And there was Thomas, standing by a workbench with a warm smile. "This place used to be my lab," he said. "Now it's yours too, if you're ready to build." Mira took a deep breath. For a moment, she couldn't speak. No one had ever believed in her like this before. I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing," Thomas replied. "Just start." And with that, the millionaire and the poor girl became something no one expected: partners in purpose. Mira had never seen so many tools in one place before. The warehouse felt like a dream. There were long tables, metal shelves, wires, nuts, bolts, and parts of old machines carefully stored. She walked slowly, running her fingers along the cold surface of a workbench. Thomas watched her with quiet joy. It reminded him of when he was young, full of ideas, full of questions. "This place, it's perfect," Mira finally whispered. Thomas nodded. "It's not new, it's not shiny, but it's still strong. Just like you." Mira smiled. The next few days passed quickly. Thomas taught Mira how to use the tools safely. He showed her how to shape metal, how to solder wires, and how to test circuits. Mira learned fast. Her hands were steady, her mind sharp. Together, they began building Mira's small invention, the hand-warmer device. Mira had drawn it in her notebook, and now, piece by piece, it was becoming real. One evening, while Mira connected two wires, Thomas sat nearby, watching the sunset through a dusty window. He spoke softly. "You know, I once built a flying robot. The size of a chair," he said. "It was meant to carry medicine to mountain villages." "Did it work?" Mira asked, curious. "It worked well. But then people stopped funding it, said it was too expensive, said people in cities needed help more, so it was forgotten." Mira looked down. "That's not fair." "It's the way things are sometimes," Thomas said. "But that doesn't mean we stop trying." There was a quiet silence between them, comforting. Not heavy. Later that week, they finished the first working prototype of Myra's hand warmer. It was a small round device, soft on the outside, with a rechargeable battery inside. When pressed, it gave gentle heat for 3 hours. Lightweight and safe. They tested it by giving one to a homeless man outside the train station. His hands were shaking from the cold. When he felt the warmth, he looked up with wide, teary eyes. "Bless you," he whispered. That one moment filled Myra's heart. It felt better than anything she had ever known. News of the little device spread fast. One of Thomas's old friends, Mr. Patel, who ran a small tech blog, came by the warehouse. "I heard something wonderful is happening here," he said, taking photos and asking questions. He posted a short article titled, "Retired Genius" and "Street Girl Invent Tech to Help the Poor." The post went viral. People shared it online, called it inspiring, even beautiful. The next day, the door of the warehouse didn't stay closed. People knocked. Some brought coffee. Others brought spare parts or old tools they didn't need. One woman, a teacher, said her class wanted to build hand warmers too. Myra looked at Thomas in shock. "Why are they all helping?" Thomas smiled. "Because kindness spreads faster than fire when it's real." That night, Myra sat alone for a while, thinking. She had come from nothing, no support, no money, just a notebook and a dream. And now she was here, in a real lab, working with a man who had once helped build machines for governments, all because of a pizza and a coin. She took out the coin Thomas had used to help her that night. She had kept it safely in her pocket. It wasn't worth much in money, but to her, it meant everything. She placed it gently on the workbench. Under the light. It reminded her, one small action can start something big, and this was just the beginning. The warehouse buzzed with quiet energy. The soft clicking of tools, the sound of wires being clipped, and the hum of small machines filled the air. Myra was working on the second version of the hand warmer. This new design was smaller and more efficient. Thomas sat beside her, watching closely. He liked how her hands moved with purpose now. She was no longer unsure. She believed in herself. "This version should last 4 hours instead of 3, Myra said, adjusting a tiny screw. "And it can be charged with sunlight." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Solar-powered?" Myra nodded. "I thought. Many people on the streets don't have electricity, but the sun is free." Thomas smiled. "Now you're thinking like a real inventor." As the days passed, more volunteers joined the little workshop. Some were students, others were retired engineers. One man, a former electrician, offered to help build solar charging boxes. Another woman said she could sew small pouches to keep the devices warm and safe. Myra and Thomas didn't ask for help, people just came, drawn by the kindness and purpose of their mission. One afternoon, a man in a gray suit visited. His name was Mr. Simon, a quiet, polite man who worked for a local charity. "I read your story online," he said. "We help people during the winter. We'd love to hand out your devices across the city." Myra looked at Thomas. He gave a small nod. "That would be wonderful," she said. Within a week, 50 hand warmers were ready. Each was tested, cleaned, and packed by the team. Myra wrote a small note inside each pouch. "You are not forgotten." As the devices were distributed, stories began to return. One man said he hadn't felt warm fingers in years. Another old woman hugged a volunteer and cried. A group of children shared one device, passing it hand to hand during the cold night. Myra read these stories with wide eyes. "We did this?" she asked. Thomas put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No, you did this. But good things often bring attention." One morning, a black car stopped outside the warehouse. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark coat. His name was Mr. Lorne. He worked for a big tech company in the city. He walked into the lab with a confident smile. "I've heard about your project," he said. "Very touching, very impressive." Mira greeted him politely. "Thank you." "We're just trying to help." Mr. Lorne looked around, nodding. "You're doing more than that. You're solving real problems. We'd like to offer support." Myra raised her eyebrows. "Support?" "Yes," Lorne said, handing over a card. "Funding, tools, a proper lab. We believe this idea can be much bigger. Not just for this city, for the whole country." Mira hesitated. "But we don't want to sell it. It's for the people who can't pay." Lorne smiled, but it was thin. "We understand. We'll talk again soon." He left without saying more. Mira watched the car drive away. Thomas stood beside her quietly. "Be careful," he said. "Why?" "Not every smile is kind," he replied. That night, Mira sat on the rooftop of the warehouse, looking at the stars. The cold air touched her cheeks, but her hands were warm. One of her own devices in her pocket. She thought about Mr. Lorne's offer. A bigger lab sounded good. More people could be helped. But something felt strange. She didn't start this to become rich. She started because someone helped her when she had nothing. She wanted to keep that spirit alive. Thomas joined her on the rooftop, bringing 2 cups of warm tea. "Can I ask something?" Mira said, "Of course. If you had said yes to big companies long ago, would you be richer now?" Thomas smiled, sipping his tea. "Maybe, but I don't regret it. Some things are more important than gold." Mira nodded slowly. Deep down, she already knew the answer. The stars above blinked quietly, as if listening. The journey had started with a coin and a slice of pizza. But now it was turning into something far greater, and the real test was just beginning. The next morning, Mira found an envelope placed on the workbench. It was from Mr. Lorne's company. Inside was a printed letter with smooth paper and shiny ink. "We are offering full sponsorship. A new lab, better tools, staff, and full support for expansion. In return, we request a partnership. Our company will own part of the design rights." Mira read the letter twice. Then again. It looked good. It sounded helpful. But something about the words felt heavy, like a lock on a door. "That used to be open." She showed it to Thomas. He read it slowly and placed it on the table without a word. "What do you think?" she asked. Thomas leaned back in his chair. "It's a nice offer. But the real question is, what do you want, Mira?" Mira didn't answer right away. That afternoon, a reporter arrived at the warehouse. She worked for a local newspaper and had been following Myra's story. "We'd love to interview you," she said. "You've become an example for many people." Mira smiled shyly. "I didn't do anything special." "You gave hope," the reporter replied. "That's special." The interview was short. Mira spoke about the project, the team, and the people they helped. But she didn't mention Mr. Lorne's offer. Not yet. That night, the article was published online with the title, "The Girl Who Built Warmth from Nothing." Thousands of people read it. Comments poured in. Some shared their own stories of struggle. Others offered to donate parts, tools, or money. A few even asked to visit the lab. The next morning, 3 young girls came to the warehouse with their father. They brought a small envelope filled with coins. "We sold lemon juice outside our school," one of the girls said. "We want to help." Mira took the envelope with care, holding back tears. "Thank you. This means more than you know." Thomas watched quietly from a corner. He saw how people looked at Mira now, not just as a builder, but as a leader. Later that day, Mira asked Thomas, "Did you ever feel scared when you had to choose between money and meaning?" He smiled. "Yes, many times. How did you decide?" "I asked myself, will I still respect myself 10 years later?" Mira nodded. She understood. That evening, Mira sent an email to Mr. Lorne's company. Her reply was clear and simple. "Thank you for your kind offer, but we cannot give up control of this project. This work began with a small act of kindness. That spirit must remain free. Mira, she pressed send and leaned back in her chair. Her heart was calm. The next morning, she found another letter waiting at the warehouse door. This time, it wasn't from a company. It was handwritten. Dear Mira, I'm one of the people who received your device last week. I live under the 5th Street Bridge. I didn't think anyone cared about people like me. But your gift told me that I matter. For the first time in years, I felt human again. Thank you. A friend, Mira, folded the letter and placed it next to the coin Thomas had once given her. 2 small things. But to her, they were the heart of everything. The work continued. The lab stayed full of life and light. People kept coming, offering help, sharing ideas, and building hope one piece at a time. Mira stood near the open door, looking at the busy street outside. She smiled. This wasn't just a project anymore. It was a movement, and she had chosen the right path. The days passed quickly in the warehouse. Mira and Thomas worked side by side, testing, fixing, and building more hand-warming devices. What began as a small act of kindness was now growing into something larger than either of them had expected. Every day, people knocked on the door. Some came to help. Some came for warmth. And some came just to say thank you. One morning, a city worker named Rosa arrived. She wore a safety vest and carried a clipboard. I've been asked to visit, Rosa sighed. The mayor's office read about your project. They're interested. Mira paused for a moment. Interested in what way? They want to meet you. They believe your work could become part of the city's winter support plan. Thomas raised his eyebrows. That was unexpected. Rosa smiled. They want to know if you're willing to work with the city on your terms. A week later, Mira stood in a clean, quiet office in City Hall. She wore her best clothes, though they were simple. Her hands still smelled faintly of metal and glue. Thomas sat beside her, calm and proud. The mayor, a kind-looking man with glasses, shook her hand warmly. We've been following your journey, he said. What you've done is inspiring. Mira smiled politely. We didn't expect attention. We just wanted to help. And that's exactly why people trust you, the mayor replied. We'd like to offer support. No ownership, no control. Just help. Mira glanced at Thomas. He nodded slightly. We'll accept, Mira said, if it means reaching more people without losing the heart of the project. Agreed, the mayor said. Soon the warehouse received boxes of supplies from the city, wires, batteries, small solar panels, and more. A few students from technical colleges also joined the team. With more hands, they were now able to make dozens of devices every week. Mira started organizing training sessions. She taught young people how to build the hand warmers, encouraging them to bring their own ideas. This lab isn't just for building devices, she said to one group. It's for building people too. Her words stayed with them. One rainy evening, Thomas sat by the window, watching the clouds. Mira brought him tea. You look tired, she said softly. I'm old, he said with a small smile, but my heart is full. He took a sip of tea and looked around the busy workshop. I never thought I'd see this place alive again. You did that, Mira. No, she said. We did that. You gave me the key. Thomas looked at her and nodded. You gave the city a reason to believe again, but not everything was easy. As the project grew, so did the noise around it. Some companies were unhappy. One large business that sold winter gear accused Mira of taking attention away from them. They even sent a warning letter, claiming her design was too close to something they had patented long ago. Mira showed the letter to Thomas. What should we do? Thomas studied it. They're trying to scare you. It happens when people feel threatened by good work. Should we stop? No, he said calmly. We make our work better. We stay honest. Truth will protect us, Mira nodded. We'll keep building. Weeks later, the warning faded. People continued to support Mira and her team. And the city now called her project by a new name. Warm Hands Initiative. Her photo was placed on a city billboard with the words, "Young Mind, Big Heart." At first, Mira felt strange seeing her face up there. But then she remembered the night she had no money for pizza. That memory reminded her why she started. Not for fame, not for power, but because someone helped her without asking anything in return. In a quiet moment, Thomas placed something new on the shelf beside Mira's coin and the thank you letter from the street. It was a small wooden plaque. It read, "It began with one small act of kindness." Mira smiled when she saw it. The world was changing, and this was only the beginning. Winter arrived early that year. Cold winds swept through the city, and people rushed through the streets with scarves around their necks and hands deep in their pockets. The Warm Hands Initiative was busier than ever. Mira and her team worked day and night to build and distribute more hand-warming devices. The warehouse was filled with warmth, not just from the machines, but from the people working together. Students, old builders, young volunteers, and even children came to help pack and test the devices. Mira stood at the center of it all, focused and calm, guiding each task with care. But something had changed. Thomas hadn't come to the lab in 2 days. At first, Mira thought he just needed rest. He often said his bones were tired and she didn't want to worry too much. But when a full day passed without a single message from him, she decided to visit his small house at the edge of the city. When Mira arrived, she found Thomas sitting quietly on his porch, wrapped in a thick blanket, a warm cup of tea in his hand. "Thomas," she said gently. He looked up with a weak smile. "Ah, Mira, I was hoping you'd come. You didn't answer your phone. I was worried. I've just been resting. This cold doesn't like old bones." She sat beside him. "Are you all right?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Just slower than usual. My heart isn't what it used to be." Mira stayed silent. The breeze was cold, but the moment was still. "I'm not scared," Thomas said. "I've lived well. And now I've seen something beautiful." Mira looked at him. "What's that?" "You," he whispered. "And what you've built." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. The next morning, Mira returned to the warehouse early. The team had already begun the day's work, but she felt a heaviness in her chest. Not fear, just a deep care. Thomas meant more to her than she had words for. He wasn't just her mentor. He was her guide, her friend, her family. She gathered everyone and made an announcement. "From today," she said, "we will begin training new team leaders. The project must continue even if one of us can't be here." They nodded. They understood. Mira wasn't just preparing them, she was preparing herself. That evening, a news team visited the warehouse. They wanted to feature the Warm Hands Initiative in a short documentary. Cameras followed Mira as she showed the lab, the tools, the new solar charging station, and the rows of hand warmers ready for delivery. One reporter asked, "What drives you to keep going, even when things are hard?" Mira paused. Her voice was steady but quiet. "I remember what it's like to feel forgotten," she said. "I don't want anyone else to feel that way." The room fell silent. The reporter asked another question. "And who helped you first?" Mira smiled. "A stranger with a coin and a kind heart." That night, she visited Thomas again. This time, she brought a hand warmer and a small gift box. He opened it slowly and found a silver badge inside. It read, "Founder of Warm Hands, Thomas." His eyes watered. He held the badge gently, like it was made of gold. "I didn't build it alone," he said. "But you gave it life," Mira replied. "And you gave me hope when no one else did." Thomas didn't speak. He just nodded and smiled, the kind of smile that said everything without words. A few days later, a large snowstorm hit the city. The streets were quiet. Power lines were frozen. People stayed indoors. But Mira and her team didn't stop. with thick coats and backpacks full of hand warmers. They walked through the cold, delivering warmth to shelters, bus stops, and bridge corners. Mira's fingers were numb, but her heart burned with purpose. Every time someone took a hand warmer and smiled with relief, Mira felt something deep inside her grow stronger. This wasn't just about devices anymore. It was about human connection. Kindness. And a promise kept. Back at the warehouse, the lights flickered from the storm. But inside, it was warm. Not because of the machines, but because of the people. Mira sat beside the coin Thomas once gave her. She whispered softly, "This is for you, and everyone like you." And in the silence, the warmth of one small act continued to spread.